got a little bit of a bonus episode, to say the least, of the Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. So here's the deal. The body isn't even cold on our full hour-and-a-half episode of the Torres pod that we recorded on Sunday morning. We talked about the Auburn-Georgia fiasco. We talked about Indiana. We talked about all sorts of stuff. And we certainly talked about Penn State falling to Northwestern, their third straight loss of the season. Well, I bring it up because we talked about what do you do with James Franklin. Well, we got an answer because just moments ago, Penn State actually did it. Penn State has fired James Franklin. I am, just like everybody else, still trying to figure out all the details. He will be owed close to $50 million to not coach again. James Franklin has officially been fired. Before we get into this, for the podcast audience, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put this right at the front of the podcast. This will lead the show. Then we'll get into the rest of the episode. We will obviously cut off all things James Franklin we'll cut out all the old James Franklin stuff. But if you're listening on podcast, we are going to lead with James Franklin. We are then going to get to Auburn, Georgia, all of that. And if you're listening on YouTube, you're already in the know. So James Franklin has been fired. I'll tell you this, man. I was done for the day. We were kind of done editing everything. I was watching some Red Zone. Shout out to somebody who DM'd me, quote, "I can't believe they actually did it." So James Franklin is out. We will discuss all of it in a minute. Drop your comments. I already see, by the way, some teams, some fans are like, my team needs my school needs a coach. Should this be a guy that we consider? So let's go ahead and dive in. All right. So a couple things on the James Franklin stuff. If you missed our episode on Sunday morning, the genesis, the big picture conversation that I believed with James Franklin was pretty straightforward. I thought it was basically a no-win situation for Penn State. And I thought it was actually a tough situation given the Drew Aller injury. Now, listen, if you watched yesterday's game, it was a debacle. Backstory, we all know the situation with James Franklin. Up until this year, the one thing you could say about James Franklin was no matter what you think about him, he's going to win all the games he's supposed to, and he's never going to lose games that he's not supposed to, right? So it was kind of the push-pull. This is what you get with James Franklin, but this is what you give in return is we might not beat Ohio State. We might not beat Michigan when they're good. We might not now beat Oregon, but we're never going to lose to Rutgers. We're never going to lose to UCLA, Northwestern. And that's exactly what has happened over the last few weeks. And so last week you lose to UCLA. That basically unofficially knocks you out of the college football playoff because you still had Ohio State on the schedule. You still had Indiana on the schedule. But the loss to Northwestern, it's just crippling. It's as devastating. It's as disappointing as any loss as I can remember. And I think as importantly, it really does. It I don't want to say it puts an end to, but it basically marks, frankly, the midst of one of the most disappointing seasons ever. Because I think the thing that's different about Penn State this year than any other year is that they openly talked about it is national championship or bust for this team, for this program right now, this second. And so when you put those expectations on your program in the preseason, it's one thing, it's like Arch Manning, right? Whatever you think of Arch Manning was not publicly like, I should be the Heisman favorite. I'm going to be the number one pick. Like there are clips of Arch Manning at SEC Media Day. Like, I don't know where you guys come up with this stuff. I'm just trying to get better every day. Well, Penn State was the exact opposite. Penn State, of course, last year made the college football playoff. Last year was a play or two away from beating Notre Dame and potentially playing for a national championship. And so when you get that close, and then I think this is the important part. When you put as much money into your roster as Penn State did this year, to quote Vince Vaughn and Wedding Crashers, no excuses, play like a champion, right? Because listen, it's not just that expectations were high. This was a team that in a year where Ohio State lost everybody, Michigan is starting a true freshman at quarterback, Oregon lost everybody. This is who Penn State brought back. A quarterback that we thought was the potential number one overall pick in the draft. 2,000-yard rushers in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Most of the O-line, most of the defense. the three receivers out of the portal, Ross, Trebor Pena from Syracuse, and then Kyron Hudson from USC. So much money was invested into this team for years. This was the argument for James Franklin. Behind the scenes, it used to be a big thing. It's like, Penn State says they want to compete with Ohio State, but are they really doing everything that they need to do to truly compete at the highest level? Well, fast forward to this year, I don't think you can say that there was anything that James Franklin needed that he could not get. Jim Knowles is the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. Kolonicki, I always trip over his name, Andy Kolonicki, is a very well compensated offensive coordinator that was supposed to be the solution. And so how about this? It's not only that your team stinks, it's not only that your season's over, but everything is getting worse. Like, it's one thing if you just lose to Oregon and you take another loss to a good team, even at home. That's not what this is, and that's not where it was trending. And so you look at Penn State, it's like, okay, you've lost 3 straight. Drew Aller is now out for the year, and look at the schedule. They're actually about to hit the tough part of the schedule right now. This was supposed to be the easy part. This was supposed to be, no matter how bad things went, you're 5-1 going into this portion of the schedule. The next 3 games at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana at home. And so to me, you're going to be 6-6 3 weeks from now. And I really just thought, they probably keep him until the end of the year. And then I thought even at that point, you could justify, we can keep him because he lost Drew Aller and and this and that. But the fact that this happened, this has to be, in all my years covering sports, maybe the most shocking firing that I can ever remember, not because it's not warranted, because I know we're going to have Penn State fans see it. We'll get to some comments in the chat here in a minute. But the bottom line is it's so unprecedented because, 1, the money, but 2, where we were 3 weeks ago, right? I remember being on the show whatever day it was. I don't even remember what day it was. But remember when he did that interview, he did the press conference where he did the press conference where they were like, how do you celebrate a win? This was probably after the Villanova game. He said, honestly, I'll be totally honest. He's like, I go home. We usually have people over. I'll go and mingle for 10 minutes. He's like, then I sit in my boxers and I watch football. And it was so funny because I remember seeing that and being like, he's so relaxed. Like, I don't know if it's going to work out or if it's not going to work out for him this year, but he is so relaxed. He's so calm. I think he knows that he has a pretty good team. And so for this to come full circle, where that was quite literally the last win of the James Franklin era, like, what else do you even say? Because, again, you look at this whole situation. 3 weeks ago, they were top 5 in the country hosting Oregon. And it's worth noting, they almost won the Oregon game. They were down 17-3 in the fourth quarter. They rallied to tie it. But remember, what was it? The first overtime, they actually took the lead. I think they had Oregon down to a play or 2. You just talk about how different the world is if they win that game as opposed to where they are now on a 3-game losing streak. Now, I think what is also surprising is just the buyout number of it all. $50 million. It is insane. Second biggest buyout as of now in the history of college football. And that's why, frankly, I didn't think anything was going to happen. Because when you looked at this whole situation, you said, you're going to fire him, $50 million. He's got a 75% win percentage at Penn State. And certainly if you take out the COVID year, if you take out his first year when I think they went 5-7, 4-8, something like that, guys got like an 80% win percentage. And so you had a $50 million buyout. And I'll be honest, I just did not think that they would have the guts to actually do it. No matter how bad it got, no matter how disappointing it was, my perspective was, I just wonder if this is a situation where they just say it's too much money. And I think what's crazy is he is fired, and we don't even know the full details of the firing. Now, by the time many of you listen to this will know, by the time many of you listen to this will have an idea of exactly how much Penn State is going to have to pay James Franklin and how soon. But that's part of this whole buyout conversation, right? Is you have situations where sometimes guys are owed, say, $10 million the day you fire them, and then let's say he has a $25 million buyout, like Billy Napier. When Billy Napier gets fired, he will be owed $19 million. Only $10 million, and I say only with air quotes, only $10 million only 10 million will be owed within like 30 days. The next 9.5, whatever it ends up being, it's owed out over like 10 years. And so you can kind of extrapolate it out. That's what makes these buyouts so interesting. Mark Stoops at Kentucky, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. Mark Stoops at Kentucky, he is owed like 40 plus million, and it's all within 60 days of the firing. So the one thing we don't know about James Franklin, 50 million sounds like a huge number, and it is. Listen, it's a lot of money to not coach football. But a couple variables here. One, he's owed 50 million, but how much is owed within 30 days, 60 days of the firing, whatever. Two, is it offset so that maybe you owe him 5 million now, but you can extrapolate out the next 45 million over 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or whatever? And then I think three, is there any offset language in the contract that basically says if he gets another job, you wouldn't owe him, or it would offset? Offset language usually means like, say you owe him $2 million a year in buyout money. Well, if he's making $2 million a year, then it offsets. If you owe him $7 million a year in buyout money and he's making $2 million, then you only owe him $5 million. So I just bring it up because there's still a lot of things that we don't know. But the 50 million is still crazy. And here's the other thing about the 50 million, and the reason that I thought possibly that he could survive until the end of the year. Because if he survives until the end of the year, you always hold out hope of like, well, does somebody else try to scoop him up? We got Arkansas fans in the chat like, does Arkansas try to scoop him up? And remember, James Franklin only owed Penn State $2 million if he left voluntarily. And so say he took the Arkansas job, say he took the Virginia Tech job, he would only owe Penn State $2 million. They end up saving $48 million. So the fact that they made this move is unbelievable. $50 million buyout. I have so many thoughts. I'm going to try to get to all of them here in the next few minutes. But that's the backstory. National championship or bust this season. It felt like once they lost this third game, the season is over. Drew Aller's out. But I just didn't think they were going to do it. One, because of the price. Two, because he's got an 85% win percentage. And then three is because I thought maybe they tried to figure out and see if they could find a situation where he gets another head coaching job before the end of the year and they owe nothing. But it was too much. 3 straight losses, back-to-back losses to unranked opponents. By the way, the stat that I found the stat that I found on Sunday morning, I meant to send it to producer Matt. I don't know if he got it into Restream, but James Franklin, or Penn State, became the first team, I think since 1980, I could be mistaken on that, to lose back-to-back games outright as 20-plus point favorites, so it shows you where this program is. Unbelievable result, unbelievable whatever. What I want to do now is in just a minute talk about a couple things. One, I want to talk about what's next for James Franklin. Does somebody take him? And then next up, like what does Penn State do? Like, does Penn State, where do they go with their next head coach? Before we do it, though, should mention, Penn State fans, you can now go to football games again. This is great. You were checked out for the rest of the year. Well, guess what? Now you don't got to worry about it. You can go back. You can support this team. And when you do, make sure to take advantage of America's #1 ticketing app, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app, 28 million downloads. Great thing about SeatGeek, guess what? You pick all your own tickets, and they rate all tickets 1 through 10. They give you a green dot. That means go ahead and purchase. A red dot means maybe you stay away from purchasing that ticket. The best part, though, SeatGeek has a special offer for listeners of this podcast. How about this? If you go to SeatGeek.com, that's SeatGeek.com. If you use promo code Torres, that's promo code TORRES, guess what? You get $20 off your first purchase. I see Paul in the chat there. Paul, I hope you had a great time at the Texas A&M Florida game on Saturday night. Paul used SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres, to get $20 off his first purchase. So SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. While we're here, I should also thank our friends, our casino and hotel partners. We should thank Circa and Circa Sportsbook. Okay, so I've told you all about Circa. If you're in Vegas, you got to check out Circa. It is the best place to watch any game in Vegas, anytime, whatever, okay? If you go to Circa, best spot in Vegas to check out games, but I know many of you cannot get out to Vegas regularly. Well, guess what? They have opened a brand new sports book, Franklin, Kentucky, Mint Kentucky Downs. Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. They have a replica sports book. This is a place to watch all these games. I hope some of you are watching from the sports book right now. Maybe you have your phone out watching Torres talking about James Franklin. But replica sports book in Franklin, Kentucky, Mint Kentucky Downs, just the best place to watch all of these games. So go ahead, check it out for yourself. Circa Casino, Circa Sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. I'll be there doing some shows later this year. Kentucky fans, Tennessee fans, if you have a game or a weekend in mind, you want me down there, let me know. But Circa Casino and Circa Sportsbook. All right. So James Franklin, Penn State. For people just joining us, James Franklin has been fired, $50 million owed. I cannot believe that it's happening. I actually, I didn't even have to read anything in real time. I just kind of hopped on and whatever. Let's see here. We do have a statement from Penn State just moments ago. Penn State owes an enormous amount of gratitude to Coach Franklin, who rebuilt our football program into a national power. He won a Big Ten championship, led us to 7 New Year's Six bowl games and a college football playoff appearance. However, we hold our athletics to the highest standards, and we believe this is the right moment for new leadership at the helm of our football program to advance us towards Big Ten championships. Penn State is an integral part of our university and Penn State football is an integral part of our university and is an important part of the lives of millions of fans. This and that. Blah, blah, blah. All right, let's see here. $48.6 million is the buyout. It would have dropped $8 million at the end of the season. And as I told you, it would be only $2 million if Penn State had decided, if James Franklin had left on his own. So what I want to do now, I want to talk about a few different variables. I want to talk about a few different things with this. First of all, I think in some ways, this is going to sound crazy. I think in some ways, this actually worked out very nicely for James Franklin. Let me explain why. It's going to sound crazy. First of all, you get $50 million. I sound like Dr. Evil. $50 million. You get $50 million to go away, okay? And again, we don't have all the details. I don't know how much is owed today. I don't know how much is owed within 30 days, within 60 days, if it offsets, if you get another job, what happens, this and that. But why I feel like this is a good deal for James Franklin is really two reasons. One, you get the $50 million. But then two, you get to figure out what you want to do next, right? So James Franklin woke up yesterday, Penn State football coach. He is now unemployed. So he gets to spend a few weeks, a few months, he's probably going to do some media stuff. Let's be perfectly honest. He gets to figure out, does he want to do that for a year, collect some checks, whatever. I remember Matt Rule, the year that he got fired by Carolina. I vividly remember he did media stuff for about 2-3 weeks. When he got fired, he had said, I want to go ahead and just take a year off and focus on media and relax. I've been coaching my whole life, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I bring it up because if you remember, he did media stuff. He got fired in probably the middle of October, right around this time. And he did media stuff for about 2 months. He said, don't want to do that for another year. And he got back into coaching right away. So one, James Franklin gets to get paid a lot of money. He'll probably do some media stuff. But here's why I think it's advantageous, is that in some ways, his reputation is sort of more intact than if Penn State had waited until the end of the year. What do I mean by that? Yes, Penn State is 3-3, but he's still largely the coach up until about 2 weeks ago, where basically he was the guy that it was like wins all the games he's supposed to. And yeah, he loses some games, but it's always to the best teams in college football, the Ohio States, the Michigans, the whoever. And so why I think in some ways it actually worked out for Penn State is because, or in some ways it worked out for James Franklin, is because if he had coached out the season without Drew Aller, I think there's a possibility that his reputation obviously takes an even bigger hit than it would have, especially because, let me see one thing, especially we got the frame and everything. Here was the stat, by the way, on James Franklin. The first coach in 30 years to lose consecutive games where they were 20-point favorites. Okay, but why I bring it up is because if James Franklin, if they had let him coach out the year, and without Drew Aller, I think they would have at best gone 6-6, but realistically probably 4-8, Because here's the thing, their next 3 games, Penn State's next 3 games, at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana. You're not winning any of those 3 without Drew Aller. And so I only bring it up because if he coached out the season and he goes 4-8, I don't know if anybody would have wanted to hire him. They would have said, okay, it was great that you did this then. But the counter to that is you went 4-8 this year, I can't hire you. Now he gets to get fired. He gets a lot of money. And I think there are jobs where people are going to sit there and say, you know what? All things considered, we could actually do a lot worse than actually hiring James Franklin as our head coach. As a matter of fact, this was the first comment in the chat. Torrey Burks Sr., clearly an Arkansas fan. He said, Hogs, do we put him in the running for our gig now or not? Torrey is clearly a Arkansas fan. He says, and I think it's a good point, maybe he needs a new spot to refresh like John Calipari did. Maybe, ? Woo Pig Suey. And so listen, I think if you're James Franklin and you're coming off of a season where, it ended poorly, but guess what? You still have won 75% of your games. You still have had a great deal of success. There are a lot of programs that would just die for the consistency of winning 7 to 8 to 9 games a season. I know it's getting tougher in the Big Ten. I know it's getting tougher in the SEC, but I think Arkansas is the perfect example. Listen, Bobby Petrino, I believe it, but Bobby Petrino, is he going to win the games needed to have the job full time? I don't know. Well, can you go get James Franklin? You can probably get him on the cheap. Listen, I don't know this, but you could probably keep Bobby Petrino as the offensive coordinator. Now, how would that work? I don't know. But James Franklin, I'll say this. James Franklin has been in the SEC and has taken a program that is deemed to be one of the weaker programs in the SEC, and he has led them to success. Vanderbilt won 9 games in back-to-back seasons under James Franklin. And so to Torrey Burks' point, if he goes to Arkansas, is there that possibility of maybe he did just need a fresh start and maybe he can have success at Arkansas. I'll tell you this, I do think he would bring more stability, especially with NIL, especially with rev share. I've said it all along. I think Arkansas is a better job today than it was when Sam Pittman got there because of rev share, because of NIL, and with the right coach, they are going to have support. And I think with James Franklin, got to hire the right OC, got to hire the right DC. But Bobby Petrino's already there, and if it goes sideways, does that make sense for him? I'll say this. We had this in the chat the other day. By the way, I need some water because I've talked for about 2 hours straight this morning. But we had this in the chat this morning of, or on Thursday, excuse me. Give me 1 second. I can get a little water here. Kentucky. So Kentucky, listen, I think Mark Stoops is out after this year. I don't know how it works. Matt Jones last week said that he thinks that Kentucky will pay the entire buyout for Mark Stoops if necessary. If you're going to pay Mark Stoops $50 million to go away or $40 million to go away, you're going to have to hire a coach on the cheap. Well, get somebody that just got a buyout. Get somebody who, oh, by the way, has had a great deal of success again at a bottom tier SEC program in James Franklin. And so will it happen? I don't know. Kentucky's one of the few jobs that I'm going to reference here that doesn't have an opening right now. But I just bring it up because to me, why can't you go get James Franklin? He's available. You can get him at cost, probably cheap. And at some point, you're going to move off of Mark Stoops. And by the way, I don't even know if I'm saying James Franklin should be the number 1 candidate. What I'm just saying is that he is available, and I think Kentucky could do a lot worse if it opens. Virginia Tech, another example of a program that basically the job is open. That's the one where if James Franklin had been looking for an exit strategy after getting fired, I think everybody joining us now knows that James Franklin was fired. But if James Franklin had been looking for an exit strategy, that's the one that made sense. The ACC, I think, frankly, once you get past once you get past Miami in the ACC, I think there's a situation where a lot of those jobs feel very, very, very winnable, and you can build there. And I know Virginia Tech isn't what it was 20 years ago, but guess what? Florida State ain't what it was 20 years ago. Clemson ain't what it was 10 years ago. And so is Virginia Tech a spot. It's in that same geographic area. You recruit a lot of the same areas. A lot of Penn State's best players are from Virginia. And so I look at the situation at Penn State. I look at the situation with James Franklin, and I think he's going to have options. Again, is it Kentucky if they fire Mark Stoops? Is it Arkansas? Listen, I don't know that I trust Hunter Yurachek to actually make a move and actually do the things that you need to do as the AD to get the right coach in place. But I'd be on the phone with him tomorrow. And I'm not saying he's the perfect candidate. I'm saying he's worth a phone call, though. Dude that won 80% of his games, 77, 78% of his games in the Big Ten. I think that guy's worth a phone call if you're Arkansas. So does Arkansas get in the mix? Does Virginia Tech get in the mix? The other one I've said from the beginning, UCLA. Now, UCLA might never lose ever again. So that kind of throws a monkey wrench into everything. They might just never lose ever again. But assuming that they do, I think you could do a lot worse than James Franklin. Again, knows how to recruit, knows how to build a program. He does need good coordinators around him. Jerry Neuheisel's elite. I mean, Jerry Neuheisel is one of one. If Jerry Neuheisel could survive the Mora, the Chip Kelly, and the whatever era we're in right now, there's no reason he can't stay on with James Franklin. And there's no reason he can't continue having success. I'll tell you this. Let me just throw it out there. James Franklin as head coach, Jerry Neuheisel as OC, and I know we like to criticize Nico, and I've been guilty of it as well. That's not a bad foundation to open 2025, 2026. Now, you need other things. There's a lot of work that you need to do, and you need a DC as well. But I think you could do a lot worse if you're UCLA than James Franklin. So that's why I think it works out well for Penn State is because of the fact, or for James Franklin, is because he's going to get a crap ton of money. And then on top of getting a crap ton of money, he is also going to potentially have a chance to handpick the job that he wants. Now, he's not going to be a candidate everywhere. Some places aren't interested. But Arkansas, Virginia Tech, UCLA, those are all jobs that on some level make sense. Kentucky, if they eventually fire Mark Stoops. So we'll see what happens with James Franklin. Very quickly, I do want to go ahead and talk about very quickly. Let's see here. By the way, we got a lot of comments. On everything. I'll get to all the comments here to wrap. I do want to go ahead and talk about potentially some options for Penn State. So the Penn State job is open. Now, again, as I'm recording, maybe that detail's already out there. I don't have very much intel on what James Franklin's buyout looks like. Now it's 48 plus million, but again, how much is owed today, tomorrow, within 30 days, within 60 days? Does any of it get offset if he takes another job? Is it extrapolated out over years? Again, I don't want to bore people with the same details, but as new people come in, all these buyouts are a little bit different. Yes, he's owed 48 million, but as an example with Billy Napier, he's owed 19 million if he's fired. Well, guess what? He's owed 19 million, 10 up front, and then 9 over like the next 5 or 6 years. And so with James Franklin, if his contract ran through 2031. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's owed a lump sum of 10 million, 15 million, whatever, and then the rest of it is paid out through 2031. So one, I do think that is going to be a question. How much are you actually paying James Franklin? How big is the check that you're writing for him in the next 6 months, the next 2 months, the next 60 days, whatever it is? Because I do think that some way, shape, or form impacts who you can get as a head coach. In terms of candidates, I guess what I would say is a couple things. One, it's early. It's hard to know. But two, I think that there are a couple names that immediately come to mind, okay? So the first one, I'll tell you, I don't know. Again, we have to look into the buyouts, of all these other coaches. I mean, the first one that you have to at least dig into a little bit is obviously Curt Cignetti, okay? So Curt Cignetti, if you missed this morning's show, it was a barn burner of a show. We did about 20 minutes on Curt Cignetti. I think he is the best coach in college football right now. I just do. I think when you look at the fact of what he has to work with, what the resources were when he got there, what the history was, it's like, is he better than Ryan Day? I don't know. But if you gave him everything that Ryan Day has, do I think that he would be as good or somehow better than Ryan Day? I know Ryan Day just won a national championship. The point I'm trying to make, I think given everything, Curt Cignetti might be the best coach in college football. I think you at least have to make a phone call on Curt Cignetti. The issue becomes this with Curt Cignetti is that the buyout for him gets a little bit complicated, okay? So Curt Cignetti makes $8.3 million. Let me see, because I looked this up a few weeks ago with because Florida. Remember the story Reese Davis said that Florida should call Curt Cignetti? Hold on one second. Let's see here. I'm going to find the Curt Cignetti buyout on the fly. Okay, so here's the deal. If Curt Cignetti were to leave for another job after December 1st of 2025, so he's obviously not leaving this year, he would have a $7 million buyout. Now, I'll say this. Yes, $7 million is a lot to pay for a coach, especially when you just paid $48 million. But I think the counter to that would be if you just paid $48 million to get rid of James Franklin, is another $7 million to go get potentially the best coach in college football. I don't think it's that big of a thing. Now, the big thing with Curt Cignetti is, he makes over $8 million a year at Indiana. So you're paying $48 million to get rid of James Franklin. You're paying $7 million just to negotiate with Curt Cignetti, just for the right to bring Curt Cignetti. You probably got to pay him $10 million to bring him in. And then from there, coaching staff, whatever, this, that. The other thing with Cignetti, because I think you can argue that a lot of these candidates probably would want to keep a good chunk of Penn State's coaching staff, Jim Knowles, whatever. Cignetti basically has the same coaching staff that followed him from James Madison to Indiana. Indiana only lost one assistant coach after their playoff run last year. So he's going to want to bring his own guys. You're going to have to fire and buy out some of these other guys, a Jim Knowles who has a 3-year contract, whatever. So I think the Cignetti thing, he's the obvious number one. I think the bigger issue becomes, okay, post-Cignetti is a couple things. Is one, first of all, when is Cignetti going to be available? They make the college football playoff. We talked about it on today's show. I think there's a possibility that Curt Cignetti is coaching into the middle of January of 2026, right? So I think Curt Cignetti and Indiana are going undefeated the regular season. You look at the rest of the schedule, they're through the tough part. And so if they go undefeated, go to the Big Ten championship game, remember, in the Big Ten championship game, you don't have to win it to get a first-round bye in the college football playoff. It's the top 4 teams at the end of the season. If Indiana's 12-1 with their only loss in the Big Ten championship game to Ohio State, they're getting a bye, which means they're not playing until after Christmas around New Year's. And of course, that is when the portal will open. So on top of all the financial stuff, you're talking about a coach that probably won't even have his season end until the middle of November or until the middle of December, really the end of December at the earliest. And I just don't know if he's a possibility. I think the other one, because of the history with the school that is going to come up, is Matt Rhule. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska coach. If you are not familiar with Matt Rhule, he played at Penn State under Joe Paterno, so he is a Penn State alum. I'll say this, one, he's kind of got it rolling at Penn State right now, or at Nebraska right now. Now, I get the idea that, it's his alma mater or whatever. But, I mean, if you're in, year 3 now at Nebraska, you spent 3 years building this thing up to now where you're 5-1. Remember how bad Nebraska was? How hard he had to work to build that thing up? Now you got it to a place where you feel pretty good about the state of the program. And so I just bring it up because if you're Matt Rhule, you're probably gonna win 8 games this year, maybe 9, maybe make the college football playoff. I don't know. And now you're gonna leave? It doesn't really make sense to me. And especially for a job that is a pseudo-lateral job. Now, as far as his buyout is concerned, I'm trying to find all this on the fly. Matt Rhule makes $8.5 million. Now, again, there is a difference between what the school would owe him if they bought him out and what he would owe them if he decided to leave. So I'm trying to find off the top of my head just how much Matt Rhule would owe the school. Cannot find it right now off the top of my head. He's got a huge buyout, but again, buyouts work both ways. How much the school would owe the coach if they're fired and how much the coach would owe the school if he decided to leave. So Matt Rhule is going to be another one. I think some of those Midwest Big 10 coaches or Big 12 coaches are going to be guys that are probably in the mix. Matt Campbell, I know it's not the sexiest name. I don't know how many people know this. Matt Campbell is coming off. Iowa State had never won 11 games before last season. Matt Campbell, to his credit, they won 11 games last year. By the way, I apologize about the throat and the sniffles. We did an hour-and-a-half show solo, and now we're doing more. But Matt Campbell coming off an 11-3 season a year ago, 5-2 this year. They did lose to Colorado, but they're ranked in the top 25, and they are a team that is competing for a Big Ten title. Lance Leipold at Kansas. I know these aren't the sexiest names, but again, Lance Leipold, all this guy does is win wherever he goes. Won 9 games in year 2 at Kansas. Last year dealt with a crap ton of injuries. This year they're 4-3 coming off of a loss to Texas Tech the other night. Lance Leipold won a national championship won a bunch of national championships at the D3 level, built up Buffalo, having success at Kansas. Again, you give him the resources of Penn State, you can do much worse. And then, some of those younger coaches that we keep talking about. Alex Golish was at Tennessee. He's at USF. Does that make sense? John Summerall was at wherever, assistant at Ole Miss, assistant at Kentucky. He's from Alabama. Would he be in the mix at Penn State? Again, you just don't know. But John Summerall is going to get a job somewhere. You don't know where he would be on the Penn State list. I think he's more of an SEC guy than a Big Ten guy. But if Penn State calls, I think it's one of those 10, 12 jobs that you have to listen to. So those are kind of the guys that are going to get thrown around. Signetti's going to get thrown around. Matt Rule's going to get thrown around. Listen, I think there's names that we can't even think of. I know the NFL thing is a little sour right now with Bill Belichick, but there's a couple NFL names that kind of pop to my mind. So I think it'll be interesting. By the way, Gruden wants to coach college football, so maybe it's John Gruden. I don't know. But yeah, those are the guys that I think probably make the most sense. We'll see what happens. Let's really quickly get to some comments. I'm just fried here. Let's see here. So Sam brings up this point. Sam Reiner custom knives. So make sure to get a custom knife from Sam Reiner. He says you can recruit a lot better at Penn State than Nebraska. That is a good point. A lot more high school players in not only in the state of Pennsylvania, but Jersey is a bordering state. Jersey, low-key, is one of the best high school football states in America. Maryland has great high school football. That's why I think James Franklin would actually be very good for Virginia Tech. Like, if I'm James Franklin and we don't know the financials of all of these jobs, one, he was always linked to USC. Would he take UCLA? But two, Virginia Tech, he knows that area. I think he has a chance to be really good there. But to the point of Sam Reiner, he says, dude, you can recruit much better at Penn State than Nebraska. I'll also say this, the infrastructure's there at Penn State. I mean, if you're Matt Rule, Tony White may get a head coaching job. You bring Dana Holgorsen with you. You keep Jim Knowles. Boom, you're walking into a place that could compete in theory for a natty a year from now. So I think it's interesting. I don't know that if I'm Matt Rule, it's a call that I necessarily make, but it's something worth thinking about. Paul says, Dilly, ASU, Kenny Dillingham. Dillingham, listen, I know all of these guys say that they're at their dream jobs, but it is worth noting, Kenny Dillingham is from the state of Arizona. I believe he's building like a crazy house. He went to ASU. He grew up an ASU fan. At some point, it may get to a point where he says, I have to look around. I don't know that we're quite there yet. But I do think it's something worth considering. Let's get to just some of the other questions and comments. Mentioned it with James Franklin. UK would be a great program. They need a splash hire. It's going to cost a lot. That Stoops raise and extension should be illegal. Fire the AD. For Penn State, Signetti would be money in the bank. I agree with that. I just think it becomes a question of, can you get him out of the contract? And then I think, as importantly, he might not be available until the middle of January. Now, I think Curt Signetti is worth waiting for the middle of January, but who really knows, what the heck's going on there? A couple more questions, we'll get out of here, because I actually have stuff that I got to do. Ooh, this is an interesting name. Clark Lee from Vanderbilt. Listen, Clark Lee is another one. He is a guy that basically, Clark Lee is a guy that I think what's interesting about him, Vanderbilt alum, he says Vandy's the dream job, but listen, Diego Pavia, we think, is leaving after this year. Are you going to keep, knocking your head against the wall, trying to find, trying to keep making it work at Vandy, or does that at some point become a situation where you just decide that, what, I got to, I think Penn State, listen, I think especially in this world that we live in now, NIL money matters. I think more people would be, I think Penn State's a better job now than it is 5 years ago. And I thought it was a great job 5 years ago. Remember, Penn State has the biggest living alumni base in the world. That's a fun fact for you here on a Sunday afternoon. All right, I'll tell you what. Your boy's got to get out of here. Your boy actually has stuff to do today. Forgive me, apologize, whatever. I'm going to roll. I got to go. I got to run. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have done like 2.5 hours of content at this point. So if you're not subscribed to the show, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to do so. Make sure to rate and review the show. Give us a quick 5 stars, all that good stuff. We appreciate your support. And yeah, I think we're going to get out of here. Thank you all for listening. I mean, we've had probably 10,000 people watch the channel over the course of the first 4 hours of the day. Appreciate your support. I'll be back soon. There's going to be a lot to talk about this week. Aaron Torres, Pop.